What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim. I am excited to bring to you a good friend of mine today. But before I introduce her, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, follow us there. YouTube, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button. And if you want to reach out, Big Ten Football Talk at gmail.com and follow us on X, follow us on Instagram. But without further ado, my good friend Faith Buck, who is part of the sports nutrition team at James Madison. Faith, how are you doing?
Doing well today, Zach. Thanks for having me on.
For sure. And I'm excited for you to give us kind of a window into kind of the state of student athletes. For those of you who have been listening for a while, you're like, one, JMU is not in the Big Ten. And two, this is not the state of a Big Ten program. So what's going on? Faith and I were talking beforehand. My goal is really to kind of get us kind of behind the curtain to see what's really going on in the lives of college athletes in a new world of the transfer portal of NIL. And Faith, you've been involved in college athletics for a while. Before we kind of get more into that, kind of bring us through your journey from student to now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Big Ten is near and dear to my heart. I still bleed blue and white. I grew up in central Pennsylvania and grew up a Penn State fan. So my whole life was excited about the Nittany Lions and cheering them on. And then went to Penn State, which is actually where Zach and I met when he was working for Disciple Makers, and I was a student there. But loved college football, love college football. The years I was at Penn State was a hard time to be a Penn State fan. 2011 to 2014 were hard years, but I think it in a lot of ways made me only more of a fan, seeing us come out on the other side of that just challenge and really hard time, and still follow them really closely to this day. After college, I stayed sort of in the campus university world, but not as a dietitian, which is what I currently do. I was doing campus ministry, working with Zach and some others at Muhlenberg College. And during my time there, got really connected with the volleyball team. Just sort of by happenstance, one of the students and I got connected and ended up traveling with them to a tournament in Minnesota and loved it. And thought, man, it'd be really cool to work in college sports. Like, I don't know what I could do with that, but would love to long-term be in college sports. And so my husband and I moved to Virginia 5 years ago, and I was sort of restarting career-wise at that point. Long story short, really long story, I ended up finishing up to become a dietitian a few years ago. And in the process of that, we live about a mile from JMU. And I thought, man, I bet I could do sports there. And reached out to the director at the time, interned with them a number of summers ago, loved my experience, worked with the football team primarily at that time, and then a number of other sports as well. Once I graduated, became a dietitian, ended up working at a hospital, but still kept working with the volleyball team at JMU, was their primary dietitian for a year. And then when a job opened up full-time, I took that. And so last year, I was working as the assistant director of sports nutrition at JMU, primarily with Olympic sports. And then actually just got promoted to be the director of sports nutrition this summer. So I'm overseeing all of our sports right now. I'm currently working with football pretty closely, which has been fun in the big transition from Kurt Signetti, who's now in the Big Ten, to Coach Bob Chesney, and just getting our nutrition in a really good place. So it's been a lot of fun, and I, in my role, get to interact with athletes every day, very much in as much as I can, not being an athlete myself, understand sort of their day-to-day experience. And it's really remarkable what they do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like, I mean, it's remarkable even just how you have kind of not just ascended the ranks, but you have to know all these different sports and all the struggles that these athletes have to put themselves through to be a division. People listening might think, oh, well, JMU, that's kind of a, FCS, or it was FCS for a while, but JMU's become a pretty big mid-major program in several sports. And I mean, obviously I think they petitioned to have a bowl game, to be in a bowl game
Mhm.
last year. They were ranked in the top 25. Indiana not only hired their coach, but they got a bunch of transfers, which I know we'll talk about later.
Yeah,
Hoosier fans that are listening, I'm sure, are like ready to go. Um, we'll also talk a little bit about Kurt Signetti. As I think, as you were talking about interacting with the athletes, you were mentioning you get to be with them on a day-to-day basis. Like what is a typical day in the life of a dietitian look like?
good question. There's no typical day. Um, so today, and I say that facetiously, but it's really true. Part of why I love my job is that every day is different. Big picture, I do three major things for our athletes. One is I do nutrition counseling. So kind of what you were talking about earlier. Every athlete needs different things. Every sport needs different things. Every person needs different things. And so personalizing that to them, making sure they're meeting their goals, things like that. I educate the teams generally on sports nutrition. So there's a lot that we can just say across the board, even though they have individual needs. And so making sure, like, for example, that the guys are eating carbs before they work out so that they have energy to perform in the way that they need to. And then having protein and carbs afterwards to replenish their muscles, to fight some of that soreness, to be ready to go for the next session. Things like that are just universal. And then the other thing that I do, and this is a big part of football particularly, is kind of providing them snacks and meals and food.
Mm.
And so today looked a lot like that. Today was our last day before official preseason, and the guys were doing some field work. And so for after that, we had some protein yogurt parfaits that we made for them, which is a little
Mm.
fancier than we usually go, but it's the last day. So making it
There
interesting.
you go.
And giving them that kind of stuff afterwards.
Mm.
And so my days are sort of a mix of those three things. Plus, I have a lot of administrative duties as well, with being the director, managing the budget, ordering a lot of food, talking to vendors, restaurants.
Yeah. So
So
you're a foodie for a lot of people. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
big time. Yes. When
Yeah.
people want to know where to go in town, they ask me. So
Okay. We'll get back to that because I have a funny story about Harrisonburg and food. But so like you're talking about individualized plans, and my guess is we were talking a little bit off air, but my guess is when someone hears like, oh, you need to eat, you know, X amount of calories, often offensive linemen, when they come in, as a freshman, they're like 240 pounds, 250 maybe. They're like, you got to get up to 300 pounds. And I think what we often think of is you got to beef up on like, just eat a bunch of cake, just eat a bunch of like other stuff. What would like a designed plan for a 300-pound offensive lineman look like?
yeah. So I think one thing, and not every dietitian functions this way, but philosophically, I really believe in teaching our athletes patterns. So I want to
Mm-hmm.
teach them how to eat big picture, so that they can do it when I'm not there. But also so that when they're not in sports anymore, they have some principles that can kind of carry through. So that's sort of baseline. And I say that because I actually rarely make super individualized, super specific plans for athletes. I'll give
Mm.
them lots of suggestions and patterns to follow. But typically, I don't even give them a calorie goal or anything like that because they have a lot of things that they need to manage. And I don't want them to have to track all of their food in addition to that. So,
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking, someone like an O lineman, they just need to eat a lot. And what they eat matters for
Yep.
sure, but it's just got to be a lot. And so I'm always telling them for meals, they need three things: protein foods, carb foods, and color foods. Color being fruits and vegetables. Um, for breakfast, that might look like they go to the dining hall and they eat three massive scoops of eggs and a bunch of turkey sausage and some potatoes and some oatmeal and some fruit and some yogurt. And that would maybe be enough. I often also have them drinking juice and milk just to get extra calories in them. They're burning so much, they're so big that they just need a lot. Then I'm having them eat again pre-practice, have some sort of carby snack. Honey stingers is something we really like at JMU, applesauce, bananas, things like that. Post-workout, I'm giving them something pretty high in protein and carbs. So like today was that yogurt protein parfait, which was just yogurt mixed with protein powder. Then we put in some fruit and granola on top. It was probably about, gosh, I don't know, it was huge. It was probably 500 to 700 calories just in that.
Oh my gosh.
And then we give them a snack. I use the word snack loosely. Sometimes snack is spaghetti and meatballs that we got
Wow.
from a restaurant in town. Sometimes
Oh
it's
my
a
gosh.
burrito and chips and salsa. That's about, say, like 11 o'clock. We give them that. And then I want them to eat again at 1 or 2, another full meal, which might be a sandwich, might be a lot of guys will do like rice and some sort of meat and vegetables. That's kind of their go-to. So do that then, and that would be a pretty large quantity of that. Like we're
Mhm.
talking a full plate full of that. And then they would eat dinner again, same kind of thing. Another thing they really like is like sweet potatoes,
Mm.
ground beef, salad. And they're eating probably at least, oh gosh, at least half a pound of ground beef, probably more. And at least 2 potatoes, if not more.
Wow.
And then also, I'm having them drink Gatorade all throughout the day, full sugar Gatorade because they need the calories, and
Yeah.
we just need to get the electrolytes and the calories in them. So that's kind of a general. So 4 meals plus 2 snacks, maybe an evening snack as well, like a
Wow.
yogurt or something like that, just to make sure that they're getting what they need. And it's interesting. I was talking to a tight end the other day, and he said, I just hate eating. Like
Mm.
it's it's such a chore in some ways, like it's part of their profession, if you will, that
Yeah.
they have to eat so much. And so often the enjoyment really leaves it. And one of the things that's really different about an athlete than an average person is that they just have to eat when they don't want to and when they're not hungry to
Yeah.
maintain the bodies that they have. So um, yeah, that's a snapshot of what it might look like.
Yeah. And I think what you're helping maybe us understand, I think some people, I think especially guys, they're like, I'd get to eat that much. That'd be amazing. And it's like, I think what you're helping us understand is that even eating becomes a unique stressor
Yes.
to these athletes.
Yep. And it's a real burden. And I think, part of what I see my job as is in the foods that I'm providing them, how can I make them as fun, as interesting as possible when
Mm-hmm.
also helping them to reach their nutrition goals? That's how we came up with that yogurt protein thing today. I mean, we just made that up this morning.
Yeah.
Because if you drink a protein shake every day after workout, you're going to get really, really sick of it.
Yeah. 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 So how do you make it uh, more fun, more enjoyable, like what's new? Yeah, changing things up.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to get back to the stressors in a minute, but like what does the communication look like then with the athletes coaches and the athletic director, like how do you like is there communication with them as well about their nutrition, or is it just you're mostly with the athletes and then the coaches are like they doing good? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, I think it depends on the coach. So I have really clear lines of communication with all of my coaches. Working with Coach Chesney this summer, he is big, really, really big on nutrition. And so he is very interested in what I'm doing.
Mm,
And for other medical professionals who might be listening, I'm limited a little bit by HIPAA and patient privacy. But in specifics of certain people unless they give me explicit permission to tell him. But big picture in terms of what we're doing for the team, how we're educating them, the foods we're providing them, he's really, really involved and has thoughts and often has ideas that I will implement. So I think it depends on the coach. I think coaches are more and more realizing that nutrition is such a huge piece of performance. If your
mhm.
nutrition is bad, you're going to get injured. You're not going to recover. You're not going to perform well. You're not reaching your potential. And so I think coaches are leaning into the expertise of dietitians more. So I would say that they leave me to what it means to be a dietitian, right, to the particulars. But they're definitely interested in what's going on with their athletes. And, in other coaching situations, maybe they don't weigh in as much on particular food choices or, what I'm feeding the team. But if an athlete gets injured, it's really important to them that they're following up with me and that their
Yeah.
recovery is really monitored by nutrition. Administration, I think, is involved in the sense that they're throwing more resources at us, right? Like they sort of decide our budget and our
Mm-hmm.
staffing. And the more that they see that nutrition is important, the more that they give us. And
Mm-hmm.
JMU particularly is doing really well in that at our level. So yeah, lots of communication for me with them.
Yeah.
Specifics are often left out, but big picture stuff gets communicated.
Gotcha. Yeah. And it makes sense that if you're the director, you're gonna spend more time on the high level stuff, especially with
Yep.
the admin. So, but I think that helps me and helps others understand, like, you're communicating as the director of of nutrition there, like you are talking with everybody. Like you're talking
Yes.
with coaches, you're talking with athletic director, you're talking with the student athletes, and you're coordinating all these things, and that's a big job.
Yeah.
Is that? I mean, how many? Like, what's the longest week you've worked? Just curious.
Last August, I worked 21 days straight.
Oh goodness! Wow.
Um, and that's for preseason. That's why that happens. And I
Yeah.
plan for August to be my busiest month. And I'm starting, I think it's Tuesday. We start
Yeah.
that string again.
Fall camp.
Um, you got it.
Yeah.
Fall camp and then preseason for all of my other sports as well. So
Hmm.
um, yeah, it can be very long. I couldn't even tell you how many hours I work in those weeks, 60 plus.
Yeah.
Um, there are other times that are slower, right? I had lunch with a friend today, had a 2-hour lunch off campus. So it's
Yeah.
flexible,
Yeah.
but there are some times that are really kind of hectic.
Yeah. Well, it's. I mean, it's very similar campus ministry. I'm sure. Like it's seasonal.
Totally.
Although I'm not going to get fired if the football team goes 4-8. So, or I don't know if you will either, but
Yeah, I'm
other,
not sure about that, but I hope
yeah,
not.
other people will, and
Yes.
you might have a link to that. So, um, we were talking about stressors and rigors, and I think the food piece is one that we don't often think about. I think others, name, image, and likeness, the transfer portal, I think a lot of people have been very excited for that because it feels like the athletes finally are getting recognized financially and being taken
Yep.
care of in many ways. And I think that's a good thing for college
Hmm.
football. And yet, despite the benefits of it, one, the NCAA has not really done what they should. I'll be more kind to the NCAA than I typically am today. But they haven't maybe not managed it super well. Um, and then whenever you introduce money into the equation, it complicates things.
Hmm.
You obviously don't manage that, but you had mentioned, like, you deal with the nutrition and caring for their bodies, but in that you end up caring for their souls, you end up building relationships. What are some of the rigors that these new things have really brought about in the athletes' lives?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think some of that is still being really fleshed out. And I think, to your point earlier, working at an FBS, yet mid-major program, my perspective is going to be different than maybe someone who's working in the Big Ten, right?
Mhm.
Um, the reality is we're just not throwing around as much money in NIL as some of these
Mm.
bigger schools, the power, I guess, power four now, um,
Yeah.
the money that they have. So, um, yeah, I think some of the effects that I've seen of it, one that's really nutrition specific actually, is that supplements are not regulated by the FDA, and they
Mhm.
can contain banned substances
Oh.
that the athletes could get disqualified for. And so a big part
Hmm.
of my job is helping them to be informed about the things that they're putting in their body that's not food. Protein powders, creatine, vitamins, stuff like that. One of the challenges that has come up with NIL is that some not very good supplement companies have wanted to sponsor some of my athletes and give them free products. And trying to convince them that though they may be offering you financial incentive, this is not actually good for you long term. Like
Yeah.
you're putting your big picture career at risk. Now, that's more of a specific, like a product reaching out to an athlete, and that's very nutrition specific. But I think that's one of the challenges that I've seen them face and have to wrestle with. Like, is this actually a good deal for me? Or is it actually something that's going to harm me? I think the other pressure is that it's really, the kids just go where the money is. And so, as someone who's spent 4 years at a university and I have tons of Penn State pride and, still carry around my alumni mug at work, I think some of that gets lost on some of these athletes, because if this school is offering you $500,000 in a brand new truck to go play for them, they're probably going to go.
Right.
And that's a blessing and a good thing in some ways, right? Like, cool, they get paid. And how do you say no to that? But at the same time, they miss out on the experience of, just really having an alma mater that they're behind. And I'm just looking at one of our QBs in the Sun Belt, and he's been at 4 different schools in 4 years.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what he wants. Maybe that's good for him. But to me, that's a real miss of college. You miss out on the relationships. You miss out on sort of the normal college experience. And it's all just very much driven by NIL and the transfer portal. Pre-transfer portal, people were saying for a long time. Like I mentioned at Penn State, after the big scandal happened, all those guys had the opportunity to transfer. And that was sort of unusual then,
Yeah.
That's now the new norm. Like when Kurt Cignetti went to Indiana, we got a new coach, a whole new coaching staff, and like 60 new players. So it's a whole new team. And there's something fun and exciting about that. To me, I think you miss out a little bit on the college experience. So
well, and it's as you were talking, I was thinking of another purple and gold school, like Washington is going through something very similar. Kalen DeBoer goes to Alabama. A lot of his players either go with him, they go to the draft, or they transfer. One of their top corners, Jabbar Muhammad, goes to their rival, Oregon.
Yeah.
And like, it's like, how do you like, and I think it does bring this struggle where college football was always built on the on the student population, the communities, the rivalries. And I don't think we'll ever lose it.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, like, we won't lose it wholesale, but I do think you miss, like, we're losing some of it, some of the pageantry. And I think that's hard. And especially, like, we should be celebrating what JMU did the past couple years.
Yeah.
And like, they've come in, they've really made an impression on the FBS. And instead we're talking, and we'll talk about a little bit more, but we're going to talk about Curt Cignetti going to Indiana, who the little bit I know of him, he's a bit of a spark plug. I don't know if you heard about what he said at the Indiana pep rally when he was introduced. But he shot his shot. He said, Purdue sucks, and so do Ohio State and Michigan. And I was like, I like your spunk, kid, but I don't know if you're going to like playing them. But anyway, but yeah, I think there's a lot lost, I think, in that. Are there other things that you see, like with the finances? Like, what positives would you say have come out of it?
Yeah, I think a positive, and I don't see tons of NIL happening at our level. One of the positives is that the kids who are really good are getting compensated for that, and they're reaping the benefit from that. We had a volleyball player who was sponsored by Sunny D, and
wow,
made a couple $1,000s to make a TikTok.
Wow.
Like, and that's cool. Like, I'm excited for her about that. Like, she's really good. She's a pro now, playing in the professional league, was just signed for a second season. And so I think
Wow.
that it's fun to be excited for them, and to see them get to reap some of that reward, because what they're doing is, it's so rigorous. Like, they get a lot of benefits for sure. I'm not going to deny that. If a kid's
Yeah.
on full scholarship, they're getting tons of benefits. And I was just telling an athlete today, like, that, I had an hour-long session with her, and if she were not a student athlete and she went to just go see a dietitian, a specialist dietitian in the community, like, she would pay over $100 an hour, to
Yeah.
talk with them. And so even that, um, they just have a lot of benefits, and that's a good thing, because they're putting in tons and tons of time to be
Yeah.
excellent, and to do their sport well. And so I'm excited for them that they get to reap the benefit of that financially and otherwise.
Yeah. So I think just to maybe wrap a bow on this, I think on one hand, what we're seeing is like we really are seeing these things really benefit athletes in a positive way.
Hmm. For
But
sure.
it, but if I could maybe target and condense everything you said about the negatives, it's you're introducing so many more uh, decisions
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
a
I think so.
in a young person's life. And like I don't know about you, Faith, but for me, like I need more decisions. Like I need a hole in the head.
Yeah.
Like and but they keep coming. And but like when I was 21, like it was like, okay, do I date this girl? What do I think about like career? And those were big decisions and that was it. And
Right.
granted I wasn't an athlete, but like those were the decisions. Now it's like there's those decisions, but then there's also I've got to think about who might sponsor me. I've got to
Yes.
think if this is a dead end for me career-wise. I've got to think
Hmm.
about like and that's it's the blessing and curse of this world we live in, which is
Yep.
you now have all of these options and all of these decisions at your disposal, which is great if you have a lot of people around you that can help you. But if
Totally.
you're on your own, and I'd imagine there are probably times where you're almost like a second, like a sister or like an aunt or even like a mom to
Yeah,
some of these student athletes.
for sure. Yeah.
I want to transition a little bit because we talked a little about Kurt Signetti. I know you probably don't get you probably didn't get a ton of time with him, but for the Hoosier fans that are listening, you know, any tidbits that you picked up on as you
Yeah.
interacted with him?
Yeah. I have one Kurt Signetti story, and then some kind of just legacy that he left behind him. Um, my very first day on the job last summer, we were in the kitchenette in the football office, and I just said hey and introduced myself and struck up a conversation. He was like, "Come to my office, we'll chat." And we talked about his family and my family for 30, 40 minutes.
Wow.
Um, really, really friendly guy, like great interaction with him in that way. I think that what I learned after that is that's not his norm.
Oh,
So
really?
I don't know why that happened, or who knows. But really enjoyed chatting with him. But I was even talking with some of the players, and they're like, "Have you ever talked to coach for 30 minutes? Have you ever talked to coach for 30 minutes?" They were just floored. They thought it was
Wow.
hilarious.
Hmm.
But some of the legacy that he's left behind is, well, obviously he's a winner. Like, we did
Hmm.
exceedingly well under his leadership. And I think that part of his success, at least from what the guys have expressed to me, is that he really trusts his people. So he is not a guy that has his fingers in every pot. Um, his quarterback guy is going to do the quarterbacks, and
Hmm.
his linebacker guy is going to do the linebackers, and he's going to trust them to do that and empower them to do that, and set them up for success in that. And so, there's some coaching dynamics where the head coach sort of is in a little bit of everything. From
Hmm.
everything I've heard about Signetti is that he's a little bit more removed. He's around, he's a little bit more removed, and he's relying really heavily on all of his positions coaches to just be really excellent. And they are. And they all went with him. So
Yeah.
Um,
So you're rebuilding
Hoosier
rapport with
fans,
all these coaches.
yeah, exactly. You can look forward to that because they're really good at what they do.
Yeah. There's been a lot of buzz, and this is maybe a bit of a spoiler. Although I every off season I try to I go through a grid of all my teams, like in the Big Ten, go through their schedules and figure out who's going to finish 1 through 18 with no divisions. Thanks, Big Ten, for doing that to us. And I'm having a hard time not having Indiana go bowling, which is for them
Mm,
would be amazing because
huge.
they've been so bad
Yeah.
with the one exception of 2020, which they gave me a heart attack as an Ohio State fan. Um, but they he's the buzz around the Hoosier program has been as high as I can remember. So hopefully that's a ringing endorsement for those of you who are Indiana fans.
Oh, yeah.
And for those of you who are intrigued by Indiana going into the season, uh, I didn't ask you this in our prep, but I'm curious how close do you follow Penn State right now, and what are your expectations on their season?
Good question. Not closely enough to have expectations of their season.
That's fair.
I will watch them when they are on TV, but I couldn't tell you who's playing for them or how they're expected to perform. And as the bleeding blue and white that I always am, every Penn State fan thinks they're going to win the Natty every year. So
Mhm.
you just go in optimistically.
That's fair. That's fair. I it's I kind of threw shade at James Franklin on Twitter, which I shouldn't have done, but I did. His quarterback, he mentioned that Drew Aller like broke the record for most consecutive passes, and but like he didn't throw downfield at all. So I just commented on it. I was like, did he say how many of those passes were thrown downfield, like past 10 yards? And a lot of people thought that was funny. So
Yeah,
um,
that's
yeah,
good stuff.
yeah, I do think I'm very I feel up and down about them this year because I think Aller could do really like I think he could take the next step, and I think if he
Mm-hmm.
does that, they could be really good. Um, Julian Fleming comes over from Ohio State, which was a little sad to me, but it's fun. I covered him in well, I didn't cover him, but I covered his high school in the
Oh,
area with
wow. Yeah.
high school football, and so like it feels like homecoming for him coming to Penn State, and
Yes.
it'll be interesting to see how they do. They don't play Michigan this year, which is weird.
Big
So
deal.
yeah, so odd. So, but I'll get you out on this, Faith. And what would you say to fans as they cheer on student athletes?
Mm. Yeah, I think a thing we talk about a lot in athletics and that I think about a lot as someone who works with them is that they're so much more than their sport.
Mm,
And I think it's easy to look at these athletes and be like, their lives are ideal and easy. And um, yeah, just in a sense, sort of idolize them and idealize them. Um, I think it's important to me, and obviously I work directly with them, so it's a little bit different, but to just see them as people and to treat
mhm,
them as people and to realize, sort of where this whole thing started, we're talking about is all these factors that they deal with on a daily basis. And right, that's all of us that
yeah.
we deal with relationship stresses and um, schedule stresses and food stresses. And there's a lot that these student athletes are juggling that makes them really good. And they have a lot of resources. And I think, thing that I can hear that can kind of bother me from fans is like, wow, they get so much, that sort of idea. And they
Mhm,
do. But I think it's pretty necessary. Like the rigor is so intense. The the emotional toll is hard. I do nutrition counseling, but when I sit with people in my office, they often are telling me about far more than their food choices. And I
mhm.
think that's just because they're juggling more than your average 18 to 22-year-old. Um, even the reality of, a lot of these guys in the Big Ten are juggling fame, and
Mhm.
that's hard. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to be in the public eye and to not just be able to be sort of an average college student, and there's blessings with that, right? Like, it's both, but
Yeah.
to just see them more holistically as people and as college students, and as people who are really putting in the work, I think is important for fans, and is important for me as well. Just
Mhm.
working with them to treat them in a sense like I would treat anybody else,
Yeah.
um, as complex and not just a quarterback or the star soccer player or whatever.
Yeah. And you know, listeners know I tend to go spiritual sometimes. But like they're made in the image of God. Like they're
Right.
human.
Totally.
And that I think we forget that in the heat of the moment. And I know I do, like watching, the past 3 years Ohio State's lost to Michigan. And I've realized I have to stay off Twitter
Yeah.
because I will start tweeting things and I'm like, this is not treating them
Hmm.
like in a way that's dignifying to them.
Yeah.
And like they're worthy of dignity.
Hmm.
As you were sharing, Faith, I was even thinking about there's a 5-star recruit for Ohio State. His name is Harry Miller. You may have heard of him. He was on the Today Show a couple years ago because he tried to commit suicide.
Oh, wow.
And like if it weren't for Ryan Day, the head coach, like really walking with him in that,
Hmm.
and getting him the help he needed, like he credits that as the thing that saved his life. And now he's giving TED Talks about it and whatnot. But this is a kid who seemed like he had everything together, had his whole
Yeah.
future ahead of him, was a Christian,
Mm.
like talking, he was writing scripture on Twitter, like going on missions trips and like was cutting himself. And you're like,
Yeah.
how, how does that happen? And I think
Hmm.
a lot of it's, these are real people with real
Hmm.
stresses, and this is not the only thing that they're doing. Um,
Totally.
so I really appreciate you giving us the perspective on JMU, and um, I hesitate to ask this, but I'll ask it just in case you want it. Like, if people want to follow you and your journey, like and where you are at JMU, like, do you have a Instagram or anything that people can follow you at?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. My Instagram is not very impressive, but you're welcome to follow me. My name is Faith Buck. I think JMU is listed in my bio. Um, yeah, I don't have much of a following at this point, but feel free to hop on, and you'll mostly just see about JMU sports on my Instagram, which is kind of a fun thing to follow, even if you're in the Big Ten, especially
Yeah,
since you're taking all our players. So,
yeah.
um,
We're taking all your players, and maybe one day we'll actually just take the school too. So
yeah,
the way things are going,
fingers
20
crossed.
2041, we take JMU.
Yeah,
Yeah, when
that's
we
right.
expand to the Big 40. Either
The
either
name change that finally comes.
oh, don't get me. Uh there's an NCAA rant coming, and I shouldn't. So I'm just gonna let it lie. We I'll share that if you guys follow us on the College Huddle, um, I'm begging JR, who's our host, to get shirts made that just says the NCAA stinks. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Faith, thanks for joining us. For the rest of you guys, thanks for listening. Obviously, again, hit the like button, smash the subscribe button, share with your friends. We're really excited as the football season comes. We're going to keep bringing the state of the union for each campus, but then we're going to start talking about picks. We're going to start talking about uh, who we think is going to make the playoff. So you'll want to stay locked and loaded here Monday mornings and soon Thursday mornings as well. And of course, you can always catch me on the Big Ten Huddle Thursday or Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Thanks for listening. Take care. God bless.